All right, folks. So this stuff is getting weird. It's particularly getting weird because, frankly, the same players seem to keep coming up. Some of the same people who, funny enough, right before COVID-19 emerged, remember they also had like a virus, where the coronavirus scenario with Event 201. We'll get into that, talking about the potential of the spread of a coronavirus and going pandemic and how that would look right before the pandemic hit. Same thing with monkeypox. There were weird games they held right ahead of this. Bill Gates was calling for different measures and different things. For some reason, talking about smallpox. Smallpox vials were suddenly found at laboratories. And then suddenly people were talking about smallpox and monkeypox. Weird stuff. I'm going to go over the original documents on this with you. I'm not going to be giving you like rumors or anything like that. I'm going to show you their actual documents. We're going to go straight to the source and let's talk about this now. Now, first of all, let's talk about some of the surface stuff. Now, there's a sudden outbreak of monkeypox, of course, but what's even more unusual with this is how the World Health Organization and Bill Gates were already preparing for this all the way back in November and even prior to that, some other groups. Now, this is Sky News just reporting on when this stuff first was coming out before anybody would have ever suspected that monkeypox would suddenly become something spreading globally because it used to be limited to West Africa. Now, and again, they're using smallpox vaccine for monkeypox, so smallpox plays a real critical role in this. It says Microsoft founder Bill Gates warns of bioterrorist attacks, and I want you to remember that part because that's going to become relevant to some of the stuff we're going to talk about later. He was warning of a bioterrorist attack and urged world leaders to use germ-games to prepare in an interview with Jeremy Hunt. It says Bill Gates, who is the fourth richest man in the world, said tens of billions, billions with a B, will need to be spent in research and development to prepare for the next pandemic. And as someone who financially profits from that, that's of course in his interest. The founder of Microsoft has warned of bioterrorist attacks and has urged world leaders to use germ-games to prepare for them. Bill Gates said governments must get ready for future pandemics and smallpox terror attacks by investing billions in research and development. He also called for the formation of a new billion-dollar World Health Organization, WHO, pandemic task force. Funny enough, isn't that exactly what they're talking about doing right now with the WHO to grant them the abilities to manage global pandemics, right? Bill Gates called for the formation of something very similar to that under the WHO. And he said it'll probably take about $1 billion a year for a pandemic task force at the WHO level, which is doing the surveillance. Again, surveillance, remember, of course, that's what the US, the Biden administration is proposing right now, these surveillance programs. And this is him saying again, which is doing the surveillance and actually doing what I call germ games where you practice. And Bill Gates continued saying, you say, okay, what if a bioterrorist attack brought smallpox to 10 airports? How would the world respond to that? Now, after Bill Gates said that, 2 days later, just 2 days after that article came out on November 8th, this happened. Gates' germ-game warning motivates smallpox vaccine discussions. And it says here, this is Precision Vaccines. Again, vaccine-specific website, pro-vaccine, right? It says in an April 2015 TED presentation, the next outbreak, we're not ready. Gates warned of the hazards of a highly contagious virus and a major pandemic, stressing the importance of being prepared. Based on recent Center for Disease Control Prevention Vaccine Advisory Committee meetings, the U.S. is focused on the threat of smallpox, which is considered defunct. So the fact that it's focused on smallpox makes no sense. It was considered a defunct virus before this. But again, the important part is the smallpox vaccine, which we're going to get into, which came from all this, is what's actually being used to treat monkeypox. Says this, right? Now, based on the Center for Disease Control Prevention Advisory Committees, the U.S. is focused on the threat of smallpox. On November 3rd, 2021, following an introduction by Pablo Sanchez, MD, chair of the Orthopox Virus Work Group, the CDC's Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices reviewed 2 presentations focused on the smallpox vaccine Genios, produced by Bavarian Nordic. Genios was initially approved in 2019 by the US Food and Drug Administration, the FDA, and is indicated for preventing smallpox and monkeypox disease in adults 18 years of age and older determined to be at high risk for smallpox or monkeypox infection. Genios, and this was before any of this would have ever been a thought in anyone's mind that you would have smallpox or monkeypox being discussed as a global health crisis. Nobody would have ever imagined this was possible, but for some reason, all these folks were imagining that was possible and were preparing for it and were approving vaccines for it. Now, Genios is the only FDA approved non replicating smallpox vaccine and the only FDA approved monkeypox vaccine for non military use. Brett Peterson, MD, MPH, presented the new proposed clinical guidance for the use of Genios as it compares to an older smallpox vaccine, ACAM 2000, which the ACIP currently recommends. Currently, the smallpox vaccine is not recommended for the general public in the USA since smallpox has been eradicated. This was last year, right? They were not recommending it for wide use in the US, even though FDA was approving it, because as they acknowledge, smallpox has been eradicated. And routine smallpox vaccination among Americans stopped all the way back in 1972. Now, this is where it gets very strange. Let me show you this. Bill Gates was calling for a Germ-Game, talking about, bioterror attack, using, a warning of a possible bioterror attack, hypothetically of smallpox as the scenario. And for some reason, they held such a game. They didn't call it a Germ-Game, but held something just like this in March 2021 by the Munich Security Conference, looking at the spread of monkeypox specifically. And looking at specifically monkeypox being altered through a bioterrorist attack, very much like what Bill Gates was hypothetically speaking about. Weird stuff. Let me show you this. It says developed, this is NTI, developed, it's strengthening global systems to prevent and respond to high consequence biological threats. This is the actual website of the organization that did this. I'll show you their actual report in a bit, but this is the original source on it, right? Just saying it's not rumor. This is their actual website. It says developed in consultation with technical and policy experts, the fictional exercise scenario portrayed a deadly global pandemic involving an unusual strain of monkeypox virus that first emerged in the fictional nation of Brinia and spread globally over 18 months. Ultimately, the exercise scenario revealed that the initial outbreak was caused by a terrorist attack using a pathogen engineered in a laboratory with inadequate biosafety and biosecurity provisions and weak oversight. By the end of the exercise, the fictional pandemic resulted in more than 3 billion cases and 270 million fatalities worldwide. Monkeypox scenario, and that's what they were imagining it would work like. And there's some real nuance to this, which I really need to explain. Because remember, they did the same thing with Event 201, predicting a coronavirus outbreak. And they also predicted mass deaths, way more than actually died, of course. But they clarified late. I'll show you the documents on that as well. They clarified that, the coronavirus they were imagining was, of course, different from COVID-19, and so was different. The large numbers of deaths that they anticipated through their games, though, made it so that it was considered a real serious health crisis, which then informed, of course, gave scientific basis, quote unquote, to be able to launch the types of totalitarian lockdown policies and other things like they did. Because again, the justification was an overblown view of the ability to spread and kill people these diseases would have. Now, the same thing with monkeypox, because while they say 270 million fatalities in their game before, a year before any of this was even a thought anyone would have, 270 million fatalities was the idea that a monkeypox virus would spread that had been genetically altered to be immune to vaccinations. And so they're imagining one that, again, monkeypox has a 1% death rate or a 10% death rate if it goes untreated. And so they're looking at that 10% death rate if it goes untreated as the basis of this entire scenario they were talking about. Meaning again that they're messing with the numbers, but the numbers are so high and scary that they can use as a scientific basis to suggest different types of lockdown policies and other totalitarian policies, or maybe justify the World Health Organization being given powers to prevent the death of 270 million people as their game was imagining. Now, this report was very strange. Nobody would have imagined again a year ago that there'd be a monkeypox outbreak because again it was limited to the West Africa and was already in an endemic stage. And this is unthinkable that there would be a monkeypox outbreak in many parts of the world. But the report seemed to be incredibly predictive because, folks, it used the idea again there'd be a spread of monkeypox when monkeypox was not really a thing and simulated the monkeypox outbreak, the beginning of it, oddly, right when the monkeypox outbreak actually did happen. The simulation they did imagined it would happen in March 2022. Here we are, well, July. Sorry, yeah, here we are in July, and again, sorry, May. May 2022. I apologize. They imagined in May 2022, and here we are, funny enough, that there's actually an outbreak happening right when they predicted it, right when their imaginary war game was predicting it, or vaccine game, whatever we call it.